Hi, my name's Megan. I'm a therapist and coach, and you're listening to Career Congregation Podcast. I created this podcast to inspire people in their careers. After spending hundreds of hours working with clients, one thing I noticed that so many people have in common is just how many people truly don't enjoy their work, or worse, hate what they do every day. I created this podcast to help people start to make changes in their everyday life so they too can find work they love. Every week, I speak with people who've made changes, taken risks, or built careers in ways that feel meaningful to them. These conversations are here to offer real-life inspiration, perspective, stories, and practical ideas you can apply in your own life, whatever your industry or whatever career stage you're at. If you enjoy these interviews and are curious about what it's like to work with me one-to-one, you can find details of how to work with me in the show notes. Thank you and enjoy. Hello. Welcome everyone to this week's episode of Career Congregation. I am joined today by the very brilliant and accomplished Natalie Abou-Alwan. Natalie has been a lawyer for 25 plus years, and she's recently published and illustrated her debut book titled How to Navigate Your Career Like a Legend. So she is a very fitting guest for Career Congregation. So welcome, Natalie. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's a sunny day in Portugal. So
it's a sunny day in London too. So
you're dialing in from London.
Yeah.
Yes, spring has arrived, which is nice. So, okay. Well, Natalie, can you tell us a little bit about your early years, your cultural background and upbringing, and early influences?
Yes, so as my name suggests, I'm half Arabic, and I grew up in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, which we're all hearing a lot about at the moment. But back in those days, no one had heard of Dubai. They sort of thought I was saying Dublin. I was like, no, Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Anyway.
Could not be more different.
Yeah, exactly. So I grew up when it was really just had discovered oil, I guess, that region. And, I grew up into a very sort of noisy household. I had a lot of my Arabic family there. They moved from Beirut, and they were all quite big characters. And then I moved to London when I was about 6 years old, and have been in London really working and studying, for the rest of my life. But I always went back to Dubai at least once a year in the meantime.
Oh, wow. That's a really, amazing background. Lots of influences, right?
Yeah, and I think, when I looked back, and looked at then forward at my career, it's interesting because when you come from a sort of multicultural background, you, I think, are sort of automatically thrown into two different cultures usually. Mm-hmm. And I found that really helped me, or it gave me at a very young age this strong sense of there are always at least two perspectives on things. And you can sort of put yourself in other people's shoes quite easily. I take off my English hat, put on my Arabic, well, it's not hat, but, abaya, if you like, and then vice versa. And then looking at law, that, there are many reasons I went into law, but it actually helped me in negotiations because you could really, and especially international negotiations, which is what I really did a lot more of. So very different cultures, languages across the table, ways of looking at contracts and dealing with contracts across the boardroom table. But it really helped me understand, the position from the other side, and therefore you knew what their pain points were. So you could use that in a crafty way, but also in a way where you could understand how, we could get to a resolution on something.
My own lived experience as well. I was 6 when I moved to London from the US and attended international school, and the expression that's very commonly thrown around in the expat kind of community and international schools is TCK. I don't know if you've heard of that, which stands for third culture kid. Right. Because what happens often is that mom is from one country, dad's from another country and then you move to another country. So the kid invariably grows up feeling like they are a third culture separate from even their parents. And then they assimilate with their friends. And so you kind of mentioned that you felt like you've always had multiple sort of cultures.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting you say that, because people often say to me, you know, do you feel more Arabic or do you feel more English?
Yeah.
I don't feel more either, really. You're sort of, that's a very good expression, because you're kind of a third. You're sort of somewhere sitting in the middle of that. And I noticed that particularly when I went to an English boarding school in Kent. I was 11 years old, my sister was 12. And, you know, there were a lot of children there who had really not lived outside the UK, let alone outside, you know, they hadn't lived outside their own county, let alone, you know, outside the United Kingdom. So that's why I think it was very difficult for them to conceive of what you've actually come from a different country that we've never even heard of. And actually the deputy head of school asked my 12-year-old sister, you know, how did you get here? Was it by camel? Or, you know, gosh, that's very... And my sister at 12 years old said, yes, we took a camel across the desert. And in the end, she was like, no, we took an aeroplane from the airport, the international airport there. You know? So, you know, but it kind of, I guess in that sort of situation, as an 11-year-old even, I kind of felt, this is going to sound awful, but more interesting in the sense that I'd lived somewhere else, I'd seen different things, good and bad. I'd been assimilated into very different ways of thinking and behaving. And I felt like it gave me, you know, put an extra string to my bow, as it were. So, but I think if you're a certain way or you're quite introverted, it could make you feel very much like an outsider and uncomfortable and, you know, feeling nervous about how you're going to assimilate. I never really thought those things. I thought, wow, you know, lucky them, they get to hear about my stories.
Yeah, no, I really resonate with that, because I get asked, do you feel more British or American? And I always say British, because I've predominantly lived in the UK, but I have the American accent. So people just assume that I connect more with the US, but I really don't. And I think one of the things that happens when you develop this sort of TCK persona is that neither place really feels like completely like home. So that's been kind of like a missing piece for me, is this like, what is home? I don't know.
Yes.
And in terms of your sister being asked that about the camel, I experienced that when my older sister started university in the US. She chose to go in Indiana, which is lovely, but you know, the majority of the people that she was attending university with had never left Indiana. It's very like Midwest, kind of like Bible Belt, small town. People get married very young. Like that's just the way it is there. And I remember we went to like a frat party, and like some guy was like hitting on me, and it was so difficult to even have a conversation with him. And he was like, "Whoa, do you know the Queen?" And I was like, yeah, yes, I do. And they were like, "Oh my God, do you ride horses everywhere and like go to Buckingham Palace?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And I was just like, and I gave my sister a really hard time. I was like, "Why are you going to school here? Like, you can't relate to any of these people." So I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, you can have fun with it, definitely. Sounds like you did as well.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of have to. You have to be able to like laugh at it. And also you don't really want to make people feel isolated, you know? Yeah. So it's like, if you don't feel like explaining it, then you can just go along with it and have fun with it. So, okay, so I fully understand your early influences and those kind of experiences. What then led you into law?
Well, so I was at university and I was studying effectively ancient history for the Middle East. And I realized if I had limited options going forward. I could either, work at the British Museum or, do something in more archaeological, or again, academic. They asked if I wanted to go on and do a PhD, which I just didn't. I needed to earn money, frankly. Mm-hmm. And the college I was at, so I was at Oxford University, and the college I happened to be at was very strong for law, Worcester College. and they had their own law library, and some of the top law professors in the university happened to be affiliated with the college. So quite a few of my friends were studying law, and I used to listen to them, over lunchtime, or more commonly in the bar, talking about what they'd just been, learning that day. And I was like, God, that's so interesting. I wish I'd done law, but I guess I don't want to do another 3-year degree. I just want to start earning money. And so one of them, who's still a very good friend of mine, said, look, you don't need to do the conversion course. So I did that. So it was 1 year of law conversion, so 3 years of sort of a university condensed into 1 year in London, and then another year studying as how to be a solicitor, basically. And then I already had a training contract, which I was very grateful to have. I got that 2 years early, and they're very tough to come by. So I was very grateful for that. And I went into the city straight away after I did my sort of law conversion exams. I did 2 years training in a city law firm, which was a lot of fun.
That's very impressive.
Yeah.
Hard worker.
Well, it was a lot of fun. I could probably write a book about some of the experiences. It opened my eyes to a lot of things. That I probably can't disclose, a lot of them, but it was a very good experience. And then I worked for 3 years at a Wall Street law firm. I think it was actually the oldest Wall Street law firm, but in their London office, and that was hell. I spent 3 years earning very good money, but basically not being able to socialize, working all hours God sent, not really liking the work I was doing or the team I was with. And I think that's really where I experienced it seemed like a sort of burnout, and I was in my mid to late 20s. And then I went back to my city law firm. They asked me back, which was very nice of them, and stayed there for a couple of years, and remembered really a lot of the reasons why I wanted to leave in the first place. But what I had experienced at the Wall Street firm is I'd been on secondment to a trading company. This was just around the time of the Enron collapse.
Okay. Yeah.
And oh my God, I was like, wow, this is now why I've realized I've come to do law. This is so colorful. And we had some really larger than life characters.
And you would have your work cut out for you with that. Oh my God.
I found it so entertaining. And so that's when I decided. I was about 6 years qualified as a private practice solicitor. And I thought, you know what, I want to be in industry. And so I went for 2 roles. Actually, one was Morgan Stanley, one was JP Morgan. And I chose JP Morgan because we were setting up the business, so commodities trading and energy for EMEA, for the bank, and that was just such a fantastic experience. And then I stayed in industry. Following that, I've never gone back into private practice. I've never looked back.
I mean, wow. Enron as well. Did you know that they did, I don't know if you might have seen it, that they made a play about it in the West End?
Yeah, I never saw it actually, but I heard it was good.
It was good. I was still very young when all of that happened, but my father took my sister and I to see the play. I was a teenager, but it was helpful because I remember everyone talking about it forever when I was young, and I just didn't know what it was about. But seeing the play, I was like, wow, that's pretty wild.
And it had a massive impact on the energy industry, and actually changed, I won't go into the boring legal stuff, but it changed a lot of emphasis that you'd put in contracts because of what happened at Enron. So it was a really, it was an exciting time to be in the energy markets. I absolutely loved, so I was, sat on the trading floor. I absolutely loved it. I spent most of my career sitting on, as I described them, testosterone-fueled trading floors, and you really do learn very quickly to sink or swim, especially as a lawyer, because you're really a cost base for them. So you need to prove you're worth the cost to these traders. So I had to really learn to think on my feet, not be swayed by one trader trying to convince you that no, of course this is fine to do, lots of people are doing it. Oh, really? Okay. And also, to really stand your ground. But I loved it. And actually one of the best bits of advice I ever received was right at the start of my career. And it was from another lawyer actually. And he said, look, traders smell fear. So you need to, even if you don't really know what you're saying, you need to look like you and sound like you know what you're talking about. And if you have to go and check it quickly and come back. But you really need to, be able to stand your ground. And at 5'1" as a woman, the trading floor. I did have to wear heels just to, so they can actually hear me. But I really loved it. It was one of the highlights of my career. I mean, it was tough, it was challenging, there were some difficult characters, but I absolutely loved that experience.
Wow. And is that kind of where burnout came in?
No, I'd had burnout, and I didn't realize it at the time, but before that, I think that was the Wall Street sort of law firm burnout. Because of the hours were just grueling, it was weekends, hours. I didn't enjoy what I was doing. I think that was a massive part. The team culture wasn't that healthy. That was another part. So I think when you have all of those bits crumbling, it really can impact your energy levels, and that's what happened to me. But at JP Morgan, you would have thought that's where I would have experienced some burnout, but on the contrary, because there was high energy, there was a lot of hunger, there were some really smart people, there were some really fun people, and we were all working towards this, aim of basically building and expanding a business. And we were so successful, and I was there for about 6 years, and we ended up actually swallowing up portfolios of some of our competitors in the market, and we did some big mergers. And no, I loved it. I learned a lot from, the traders. I think they were some of the smartest people in the business. So I had a very good experience there. I don't think everyone does, but I enjoyed it. But you really had to learn to, as a lawyer, work quickly, very differently. Be able to just, somebody explained it to me, as a trader, they'll see lights flashing on their screen, trade or don't trade. And that's all they want to hear from you. They don't want to hear the whole long, rambling legal argument about something and, the case law and all of this rubbish. Not rubbish, but, it's like, it's fluff. At the end of the day, you just want to know, do I trade or do I not trade? And when I heard that advice, I thought, okay, that's exactly now how I need to structure any advice I have for these guys, because time is literally money for them.
Wow. So you're like, your intuition and your instinct must be so fine-tuned.
I think I learnt that sort of sometimes the hard way, but yeah, you had to be able to, and I've noticed now, to sift through lots of information and just go, okay, this is the important bit. It's that one tiny piece that everything's going to turn on, and that's what's going to matter for your risk profile and for the traders and for the geopolitics going on or whatever. This is the piece that they need to hear about, not the rest of it. The rest we can deal with behind the scenes. And yeah, you get a very quick sense of this is what the issue is, or this is what the potential issue is going to be. So this is what I need to protect my guys from. I loved it because it's the first time I really felt like part of a team, I would say.
Yeah, this makes me think of, I was doing a CV workshop with some people recently, and one of the phrases that's most overused that apparently recruiters don't like anymore, but would be you to a T, is thrives under high pressure environments.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
Yeah, and not everyone does. It really takes a certain type of person, and to thrive in that environment, you have to love it.
100%, and you have to enjoy what you're doing, and that was the difference for me. I loved what I did. I was learning every day. It was new stuff. A lot of it was groundbreaking, innovative, working with traders who wouldn't take no for an answer. So you had to really, if you said no, they knew that there was a very good reason you're saying no, and that's when you really gained their respect as well. So and I saw a lot of people who didn't, they didn't gel with that whole high pressure environment. And I totally understand that. It's not for everyone. And I think also sometimes, when you're younger, you have more energy. I'm sure had a lot more energy in my 20s and 30s to be dealing with some of the stuff I was dealing with that now I probably wouldn't. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, when I started my training to be a therapist, it's a very common second career. Most people have had, because it takes a lot of lived experience, really. Yeah. And a lot of the people on my course were ex-finance because they were burnt out and they had done that sort of life stage. And now it was all about doing the inner work, connecting with, self-exploration and all of that. Yeah. But they were super burnt out, and they were like, I just don't want that kind of lifestyle anymore. So it was a
Yeah,
big
and I
switch.
think that there are lots of things that burn people out. You know, one, if you don't like your job, or you don't like, you know, the team, or you don't, your values don't align with the company you're working for. The other thing that I've seen happen to a lot of very good people is they get burnt out by the politics. You know, the work is hard enough, but the politics is toxic. And I've experienced that too. And that can really, I actually write about it in my book, How to Navigate Your Career Like a Legend. You know, it's like draining the technicolor out of your life. So you kind of have to be able to step back and go, wow, you know, how do I inject more joy into my day? Because, sometimes it might mean, look, you need to move to another company that aligns more with your values. But, you know, politics can have a really negative impact on some very talented people, and wear them down, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. So touching on your book, how did you get from the trading floor to sort of stepping back, or to where you are now and having written a book? What does those steps look like?
Yeah, so I worked at BP after I was at JP Morgan. I was at BP for about 8 years, and I've always been, you know, a keen observer of corporate behaviors. And I saw a lot of good, bad, and frankly very ugly behaviors throughout my career. And I wrote an article for a magazine called The Lawyer Magazine, thinking they actually probably wouldn't publish it. And it was all about women who don't help women. So it's called, you know, Queen Bee Syndrome.
Yes.
And I was advised by a couple of ex-colleagues, you know, maybe don't publish it. And, you know, they said, we're not saying we don't agree with what you're saying, we really agree, but, you know, maybe don't publish it. It's a bit, you know, it could be a bit risky. And I thought, no, listen, if it's hitting a nerve and it's not just me, and it's not just you, this is going to hopefully help somebody. Anyway, it got published, reposted on LinkedIn, and I had tens of thousands of hits on that one article. And people connecting with me, direct messaging me, saying, oh my God, this is what I've been going through. I thought it was just me. Or somebody else saying, I've just forwarded it to my sister who's going through the same thing. And it's, you know, I've got some practical tips and tools in there that I wish I'd had when I was going through certain situations. And so that's how it started. It was a really cathartic thing for me to just kind of, and another thing, and another. But actually, I've noticed that, you know, a lot of the articles that I've put out there, some of them are, I would say, slightly taboo in what I'm saying, but everyone has come back and said, my God, that's completely, you know, resonated, you know, the people who've read the book. And what I've done is, it's called How to Navigate Your Career Like a Legend. And the like a legend is not because I think I'm a legend and I've done it in a legendary way, far from it, but because I interweave stories of legendary figures, and some inspiring true stories that I think are very apt for the workplace. So I talk about stories with Marilyn Monroe, Ella Fitzgerald, Quincy Jones, Judy Garland, my personal favorite, Elvis Presley, and actually how I found their own stories so inspiring, and how you can relate that to a challenge, let's say, you're facing in the workplace. And as you've said, I also illustrated each chapter. So to keep it slightly light-hearted, but dealing with important issues, that you can really dip in and out of as a book. And so it's supposed to be really a living, breathing companion with some journal space as well for the reader to just jot their own thoughts down and light bulb moments or whatever. But
It sounds incredible. I love it. Like, is there an age that you're targeting for that, or is it just adults?
I have had really lovely feedback from students at university. And I've actually just put up on my Instagram one of a lovely student at Newcastle University who's sort of been sharing the book with her friends, her copy. And she's saying how it's really helping her map out her future, and that it's not a kind of, you must do this, you must not do this kind of book. It's more about sort of thinking about what's important to you, what kind of environment you want to be in, and how you can start to navigate a path for yourself. There's always going to be twists and turns in everyone's career. Things don't always turn out as you started off thinking they would. But if you have a sort of guide, if you like, I wish I had this, to be honest, at the start of my career, then it could have been helpful. It's for all genders, all industries, but really, so it's from student graduate level straight through up to leadership, C-suite positions, because what I also do from my own experience again is I look at a situation from the manager or the leader's point of view, and how you can be alert to bad behaviors, bad apples in teams, dealing with other people's insecurities. This comes back to the politics and toxic kind of environments, and how you can set, if you like, a more level playing field, a more transparent team, and what you can be looking out for in your own teams to make sure they're functioning in a healthy way.
Yeah, and I love the examples of the people that you just gave that, you know, you feature as legends, because a string that ties them all together, for sure, Elvis, Marilyn Monroe, and Ella Fitzgerald all have that kind of like Princess Diana quality, where they were so loving and accepting of everyone, much to the dismay of many other people who didn't like to see someone in a position of so much influence being so open to accepting everyone. But that was like one of their superpowers, and that made them such wonderful, special examples. So I really like that you've picked those three in particular.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also, you know, they died, you know, decades ago, but actually we're still talking about them. I mean, look at Elvis. There's been movie after movie, re-release music, positive stories. You know, you don't really hear nasty stories about any of these people. And that's for a reason, because they were genuine. They were very authentic.
And untimely deaths as well.
Yeah, that is true as well. That is true. But there are always positive stories about them, you know. So yeah. So
and how many people's lives they impacted, right? It's just, it's like, and continue to influence well beyond, you know, their living years, which is, you know, legacy.
Exactly. And you know, if we look at music, how, for example, you know, Elvis, let's say he influenced so many musicians, but he was a heavy influence on Bruce Springsteen. And Bruce Springsteen was a heavy influence on Sam Fender. And I'm sure Sam Fender will be a heavy influence. You know, how it kind of comes down the generations through people who were just so inspired. And it's almost like all roads lead to Rome, you know. So. Yeah.
And the creative side of it. So you illustrated this book. Do you have a copy there with you by any chance?
I do. Yes. Let me see if I can.
Because you showed me when we had our chat previously, and it's like, have you always had these creative talents, or have you always been an illustrator?
No, I never. In fact, this is the Elvis one, so pardon all the post-it notes. So
love it.
But that's a story about how he really supported his backing singers of color. And tried to find, there's one I've done on Freddie Mercury. But I've always enjoyed art. In fact, my mother was an art teacher for many, many years. And for me, it's just a creative, you know, music, art. This is the Freddie Mercury one.
Oh, that is so good.
So I've sort of got him using his microphone to tie up, you know, these toxic people in the workplace. And that chapter is all about insecurities and how you can deal with your own, because we all have insecurities, or how you can manage other people's insecurities in the workplace to make your day actually a lot better. Yeah, so going back to the art, I mean, I thought, okay, look, I'd love to get this illustrated, but whatever I have in my mind, I can't really describe to somebody else, so why don't I just do it myself? And that's how it started. I did one. I thought, okay, that kind of encapsulates the chapter for me. And then I just thought, okay, let me try for each of the other ones. And they just came so quickly. It's almost like I had an image in my head as I was writing the chapter. And then I was like, right, this is the one I'm going to do for this. And then that was it, banged on a page, just ink on paper. But I've really enjoyed it, you know, as a creative process. It's been so much fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, using that creative side it's also very therapeutic, and so I think it's incredible that you were able to tap into it, and they're really good. It doesn't look like your first sort of attempt at illustration. So you're very well rounded. To be able to use both sides of your brain so strongly is that's like pretty great, right?
Well, thank you. I mean, it's whatever, you know, and I talk about this, you know, how to balance yourself. It's whatever, you know, it's sport for some people, it's reading for some people, it's going to lots of theatres and productions for some people. It's what can balance your weekly life, you know, because you spend so much time at work. You sort of want to make sure that you're actually living and appreciating the world around you. And I think for many years I was probably on automatic pilot, which I think a lot of people are guilty of. I definitely was. And you don't notice the small things. You don't indulge, if you like, in the things that truly bring you happiness, because we're always, especially in this day and age, feeling that, you know, we have to be doing something, we have to be creating something, you know, we have to be constructing something or being proactive and, you know, pushing ourselves. There's a time and a place for all of that, but you have to be able to balance yourself out and recharge yourself and take some quiet time and non-thinking time, which I think is why meditation has become quite a big thing. You know, recently it's just stop thinking. You don't need to be thinking all the time. And if it's an inspiring thought, brilliant. If it's rubbish, you know, you can really make yourself very miserable by some of those thoughts. So yeah, for me, it's kind of it was a nice, if you like, yeah, as you say, merger of the two things for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I get it is for sure like one of the wellness practices that I encourage with all clients is to have this sort of rest and digest time, right? Where you can switch off, like what you just touched on with meditation. Meditation, which has actually been big for thousands of years. It's just that finally people in the Western world are like, oh, wow, there is something to this, you know, because the fast-paced society that we live in where we don't get to stop. And so just this whole book that you've created with the creative side of it, it must have been such a shift for you to focus your energy on that from the, you know, 20 plus years of very different career, right?
Yeah, it's weird. It's sort of a gear change. But it's in a, you know, I'm using the same amount of energy, if you like, but the outlet is very different, I guess. And it's something I really, really enjoy. You know, a lot of my job I enjoyed, but there are bits of it I really hated. And I think that's the same for everyone in sort of corporate jobs. There are bits that are interesting, and frankly, a lot of those are few and far between. You know, if I was working on an interesting project or an innovative deal that had never been done in the market and we were trying to figure out how we do it, and getting it over the line successfully, that gave me a real buzz. Working with smart people, even if it was long hours, but if they were good, smart people, we had one common aim together, that gave me a buzz. Writing some of these heartfelt chapters has given me a real buzz in a very different way, but it's the same buzz level, which is kind of strange because it is different. But ultimately, I'm hoping that the book can help people because, you know, as I said, a lot of the time when you're on this automatic pilot, you're just trying to get the work done, you're dealing with a whole bunch of other things in your periphery vision, if you like, or your periphery mental state, and those all drain your energy. And if you feel that you're alone in that, it's even more burdensome and can carry a much heavier weight. So what I'm hoping with some of these stories that I've put in here, a lot of from my own experiences, or, you know, I mentor a lot of people from, you know, completely different backgrounds and across industries, men and women. And there are a lot of common experiences there. And so putting this book together was really for me to say, you know, look, you're not alone. There are lots of people out there dealing with the same stuff that you're dealing with, but here are some practical tips in my book of how you can actively help yourself in this situation as well. So yeah, I'm just hoping that there is something in there for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there will be. Definitely. Reflecting on your previous career experience, I like to explore with guests any sort of rock bottom moments, if one would describe them as that. Oftentimes people say, well, it wasn't really a rock bottom, but I knew it was time for me to sort of shift gears, or to, you know, focus my attention onto something else. Do you feel that in your career there's been any moments that you would say were a rock bottom? Burnout can often be one of them. or something that made you really shift your trajectory?
Definitely. There's one that really stands out. And that was when I went for a promotion role of a team I'd been in for quite a few years. Mm-hmm. And the role went to somebody else who didn't have the experience I had. But what they had were friends in higher places, not to put too fine a point on it. And I wasn't aware of that at the time. So going into the interviews was already not a level playing field, and I didn't know that. And had I known, I probably wouldn't have even put myself through the interview process. That was rock bottom for me because, I'm sitting on a bench with my peers, and I had to sit near the new leader of the team. And that was very, very difficult pill to swallow. And I had to just face it every single day and just get on with the job and think, okay, well, what am I going to do? I could leave. Or I could find out what was blocking me or who was blocking me. And I did that. And I think it's in fact, I write a little bit about it in the book where I talk about, it's actually funny enough, the Elvis Presley chapter, where he's supporting women. So there's a chapter about men who support women in the workplace.
Yes.
And the head lawyer at the time in the company was fantastic, and we still are very much in touch. And he was my mentor, and he still is really a mentor. And he spoke to me and really sort of helped me. And there was another man in the workplace who I didn't know as well, but got to know very well, who again just rose very high up in the ranks, not in my part of the business, who explained, look, this is how the game is played, sort of thing. And that was very helpful. And possibly if I'd got that role, I wouldn't have met some of the fantastic people I did meet. I wouldn't have learnt a few things that I needed to accept to be able to move forward. I wouldn't have really completely appreciated the blockers and the games that were being played. So this sounds all really negative, but actually it really helped me to figure out, okay, what do I now want to do? What do I now feel I deserve? And what do I need to do to ensure I get what I feel I deserve? So that was definitely a really tough time.
Yeah, well, and I know you just said it. I know this all sounds really negative, but those are the biggest growth edge experiences that we have,
Absolutely.
And it's so often that's how people start the journey with therapy. It's like the most difficult thing that they've ever experienced, and they can't do it alone, but it ends up becoming the most transformational thing ever for them. So and one day, it takes a while, but one day you look back on it and you're like grateful that it happened because it changed you completely,
Absolutely. And I always say, you never learn from the good things.
Comfort.
All those successful deals I was on, I learnt that, through the long hours, the tough negotiations, the reams and reams of documentation that were interlocking that I had to understand back to front. There was pain along the way, if you like, but ultimately it led to success. And I think, and I learned from that, but I learned through the pain, not because of the success. So I think, it's those challenging times and those difficult times, because people say don't take it personally. But it's very hard not to take certain things personally when you know that there are friendship networks going on in the background, or people who've known each other for many, many years, who have their own loyalties.
Yeah. And
that means that it's never going to be a meritocracy. So I'm not saying every company's like that, but that's been some of my experience. It's not always been like that, but quite frequently it has boiled down to that. So you learn from those difficult times. You don't learn when things are all going smooth and great, and that's what makes us more resilient, which I talk a lot about in my book. What makes us more empathetic, and also what kind of makes us grow in ourselves,
Yeah, and I think really sets examples for how you want to show up in the world, because you've now seen so many examples of like, that's not how you want to be, and that's not, you don't want to be putting that kind of energy out into the world. I love that you've written a chapter on men who support women in the workplace, and also even the article that you referenced on LinkedIn of women who don't support women, because we need so much more of women who do support women. And my corporate experience has been brief. Every time I've dabbled in permanent careers, it was, before I started my current journey of being self-employed. I had a couple stints in corporate, never for much longer than a year or so. But I was always very surprised and slightly like disenchanted by the females that I witnessed that did manage to get into the sort of upper positions. And I think we see it a lot in politics, global politics, especially British and American. The females that have risen to the top, they seem to have gotten there by acting like men. Is what I've and being heartless, not tapping into the like feminine, empathetic, all-inclusive, loving energy. It's very like sink or swim, like ruthless, no empathy. Like it's really, and like backstabbing. It's calculated, manipulative. It's not. It like I have like a visceral reaction when I think of some of these
I can see,
females. Yeah, I'm like, oh, why would you want that? I don't know.
Well, that chapter is very much written for you to enjoy. I call it the female of the species is more deadly than the male, and it's true. It's true. And I've experienced that 2 or 3 times in my career. And what you notice is these women have a very deep-rooted insecurity in themselves.
Yeah.
And those type of women tend to favor men. So they tend to promote men. They tend to like men around them. They tend to create echo chambers because they don't like any other form of competition in one way or another. And so I think that's why that chapter went down really well. I mean, I was surprised, to be honest, having been warned, don't publish it. And I thought, this is why I needed to publish it. And funnily enough, I was talking at for International Women's Day recently at a wealth management company in the city. And it happened to be about 100 women in the room. I don't think there were any men. And the amount of women who came up to me after my talk and bought the book and said, oh my God, this is kind of what I went through, or this is what my niece is going through right now. It was lovely to hear that at least it was touching and it could be helpful, but also slightly depressing that you think, my God, we're in this day and age, that women are still behaving in this very insecure way in the workplace. And women can be much nastier than men. I can say that having been at an all-girls boarding school,
Oh, I know. I mean, some of my closest people now are females, but one of my best female friends, her and I were actually talking about this recently, because our bond has really started since we were in our 30s, right? And now we're in our 40s. But when we were younger, we both admitted to each other recently, like, all my friends were boys when I was a teenager. Girls are mean. Like, I definitely experienced bullying and like being ostracized by like, the cool girls. Like, one minute they loved me, one minute they hated me. I could never trust them. Anytime I shared a secret with them, suddenly everyone knew. It was horrible. And my best friends were guys, literally, until I was in my late 20s, early 30s. Then I started to, have some safe female friendships. But when you're younger, I don't know, that was really hard for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sorry to hear that was your experience, and you kind of hope that those behaviors are literally left in the playground. What I noticed is that a lot of those behaviors play out in the workplace. So the bullying, the ostracizing, you don't play by my rules in my team, you don't kowtow to me. You don't challenge, you don't speak up in a meeting. I was told, in fact, I wasn't told directly. Somebody had told someone very senior that I wasn't able to communicate. I had I had issues communicating. I can't remember the exact expression she used, and that she was working on those gaps with me, while she wasn't. And if anyone had a tough time communicating, it was her. And so feeling that your voice is being silenced happens a lot. And that's what I've seen. It's happened to me, but I've seen it happen to really talented, really hardworking, good people. And until they realize what's being done to them and the game that's being played, it can be incredibly soul-destroying and demotivating. So yeah, I was lucky to have met some wonderful people who kind of pointed it out and were like, this is what's happening here.
Yeah.
So
well, I can't imagine that with you, because you're so. To imagine you not being able to communicate, you're so articulate and well presented and communicative.
You. That's very nice.
That's one of my first impressions of you. I just can't imagine someone saying that about you.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. But sometimes when you're at a low point, you start believing it. You think, okay, if I open my mouth, I'm obviously going to be offending somebody. And I talk about that again in my book. It's this chapter about men helping women again. See, all roads lead to Elvis. So, and I think I used the exact expression there, which I can't remember exactly, but the crux of it was, I'm not able to communicate without offending, which is quite a shocking thing to have found out, not from them, but from somebody else.
Yeah, and I want to touch on what you said about the poor behaviors that one hopes that they're left in the schoolyard. As a therapist, I can say that these are patterns that repeat, right? So if they're not healed or even observed, because so many people will continue in patterns for their entire life without having a moment of self-reflection and realizing it's a pattern. But usually what happens in group dynamics is we repeat the role that we played in our family. So what is unhealed family stuff from when we're really, really little then plays out at school. And then if that continues to be unhealed, it then plays out in the workplace. So I often make this connection with clients when they're struggling with, a real asshole boss, or being ostracized at work, workplace bullying. And I'm like, does this feel familiar? And then they'll realize that there's people that treated them like that when they were in school. And then I'm like, does that feel familiar before that? Or how old does this make you feel? And there's invariably almost always an aha moment, usually after a lot of sessions, where they're like, oh my God, it's my mom, or it's my cousin. And until you can see it, it just continues to play out. Patterns are horrible, but they're there to wake you up. And so I always say this about politics. None of them have had therapy. It's a bunch of people walking around with unhealed generational trauma and just deep inner child wounding, and they're running the world. It's so disturbing.
Well, it's true. And if you talk to therapists, they say a lot of their clients are in these high-powered jobs, and they are sociopaths, and they are clinical psychopaths. And I remember when somebody said that to me, I thought they were joking, exaggerating. But he said, no, they literally are, the clinical definition of psychopath, narcissist, all of those things. Lacking in interpersonal skills was the phrase that was used. Natalie lacks interpersonal skills, and I'm working with her on that.
I find it surprising because I'm sure that two of the super head honchos right now, I feel like they wouldn't even go to therapy unless they knew it was someone who they were basically paying to agree with them.
Yes,
right?
it's true.
Certain people
it's
won't hear criticism.
Yeah,
the echo chamber thing, exactly.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And it's sad, because I used to say to colleagues, my God, the work is tough enough, the work is demanding enough, to then layer on some of the politics we were all having to deal with to a greater or a lesser extent. And often these sort of, let's call them politicians in the workplace, they're very good at managing up So those who are very, very senior don't see that side of them. And I talk about this in my book as well. And it's sort of how do you, as a leader, how do you open your eyes and your ears to really get to know your teams and look out for some of these behaviors? And in fact, I've had people come back to me having read that chapter who are leaders of massive, global teams who said, you know what, I was actually concerned about a potential bullying, let's say, going on in one part of my team. I'm now going to really focus on the team meetings and look at those team dynamics to see if I can unearth some stuff going on there and actually make sure I stamp it out. So, even if I help just one person to better understand and improve the culture and environment in their team, then that's something that, at least my book has helped at just one person. That would make me feel really good.
Yeah, and I've seen so many examples of workplace bullying with friends and with clients. It's just like, oh God, like how is this not still in the schoolyard?
Yeah.
But it brings up all the same emotions as like being small. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. So yeah, what a brilliant piece of work to have put out there.
Well, I hope it's helpful. I hope it's entertaining, because it's meant to be entertaining, but I hope there are, as I said, some practical tips of where I've seen things work very well that you can taking the control back, taking it into your own hands. And I don't write in a kind of, lean in, be pushy, stand your ground, in your face kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's more about what you were talking about, sort of the quiet inside. Okay, what are my values? How do I keep my integrity? How do I stay centered in all of this? And how do I let these things have as minimal impact on my day-to-day as they deserve, actually. They don't deserve to have such a strong impact that, I've definitely been guilty of allowing these things to really overload a little bit,
Yeah, to affect you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, it sounds like the book was written from a place of great wisdom, right? On the back of what's been a pretty impressive career. So,
oh, thank you.
With that in mind, what would you say is the best advice that you today could or would give to your younger self in one of your sort of lowest points in your career?
Probably keep believing in yourself. Don't listen to the noise. And I think it's very easy for us in this very noisy day and age to be sidetracked or sucked in or be convinced of something that is actually not true and that deep down is either not you or is absolutely not true. And keep going, keep your confidence, keep your integrity, and keep living by your values, because ultimately that is what you're respected and remembered for. So that's what I would say to myself.
Yeah, love it. It's true as well. Just the overstimulation and the noise is like, it's nonstop. So great advice.
Exactly.
When can people expect, or where can people get your book?
They can get it on Amazon, although I've been notified they're very low on stock. I think they've requested some more stock. But Amazon, Waterstones, W.H. Smith, Blackwell's, all good bookstores, book retailers should be able to deliver a copy. And it's in paperback and ebook. So depending on how you like to read your books.
Okay, and so for sure Amazon, so people anywhere in the world can get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think so. I know people in various European countries and in the US and in the UK. So yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully globally.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely have some Australian and some New Zealand.
Australia, definitely. I have a few people in Australia who bought it. So yeah, it's available there.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I'm definitely going to get a copy. So.
Oh, thank you.
If people want to connect with you, where would you like them to go? Or if only if you want to connect with them. Some people don't
absolutely.
want to be contacted.
I have a dedicated author Instagram page. So the handle is @Natalie Abou-Alwan author. So you
Okay.
can follow my book journey that way as well. And I'm on
Absolutely.
LinkedIn as well. So
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Natalie. This has been a very inspiring conversation. I'm really excited to read your book as well. So,
thank you. I've really
yeah.
enjoyed it. It's been great to be here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Career Congregation. I hope it gave you something to think about or inspired you in some way. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to like, subscribe, or share this episode with someone you think it might resonate with. Every bit of support helps. If you know someone who you think would make a great guest, please send them my way via the link in the show bio. And if you'd like to support the show and the work that I do, you can buy me a coffee via the coffee link also in the show bio. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week for another conversation about all things career.